Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now. My name is Jay Is, and we are live here from Lindencraft Team Studios, part of the Research Triangle Park here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And today we're going to do something a little different. We've never have had two guests on at the same time, and so we're going to try something different here for everyone out there. And so this is who's going to join me today. I've got Chris Coy, Senior Mortgage Loan Officer with Townebank. I've got who's been on the show several times. You recognize him for sure. And then, of course, I have Steve Kruger, who is a senior expert listing buying specialist with Lindencraft Team Realtors. And we're going to talk about something rather unique. I found an article in LinkedIn. It was written by Tiffany Moustakis, who's the editor of LinkedIn News. And she has asked a question: is the U.S. housing market in a stalemate? And I figured, because in this article, it both is mentioned the Mortgage Lending Association and also Realtor.com has had surveys in this study that I'm going to read to you here in just a second. And I thought it would be great from both perspectives for you to hear, are we in a stalemate or not here in the United States? And I thought it would be just kind of fun to just do it this way. So enjoy the ride with me, because we're flying without any sort of like a net. So we're going to just do that. So guys, welcome to the show. Great to see you, Chris.
Appreciate it.
And
Appreciate
Steve, great to see you again. Okay, so here's what she says. And this is Tiffany Moustakis, again, editor at LinkedIn News. She says, there's a stalemate in the United States housing market. Mortgage applications in March were up 10% compared to February. Mm-hmm. All right. And according to the Mortgage Bankers Association, but there's just not a lot of inventory. Would-be sellers are reluctant to part with their homes, largely out of fear of facing high mortgage rates on the next properties. A recent Realtor.com survey found that more than 3/4, that's more than 75% of sellers, feel locked in to their homes because of their low mortgage rates and plan to wait until rates fall before they sell. So let me ask you guys, as you think about what she just wrote there, because there's two things at work here. We've got more loan applications, but then we have people who are reluctant to sell. All right. So are we in fact in a stalemate? I'll start with you, Chris.
A little bit, yeah. I think we are a little bit, and the reason I think that is, you have a lot of people that generally see their friends and family over the years. They get into a home, they enjoy that home for a while, and then they outgrow it. And that's a great time to sell that house and maybe move up to the next home that has a little more space for maybe a little bit larger family, or as you're doing better, more room to enjoy yourself. And that was a normal phase that went on. And now that the interest rates are significantly up in a short period of time, what that's done is it's put a lot of payment pressure on a slightly similar or larger mortgage loan to what they might have had. Okay. So what's going to happen is, when the rates were similar to what someone might have on their existing home, you can transition into the next house, and you're really only adding to the payment the critical mass of the larger loan, if you needed a larger loan to make that happen. But what's going on now, particularly in areas like the Triangle, we're here in North Carolina, and this area has seemed to do pretty well over the last couple of years. And it seems to be a little bit more resilient than other areas of the country. So with home prices being real strong here, what's happened is, the buyer that may have had a $350,000, $400,000 house a couple of years ago that's outgrown that, they want to sell that and get into a $550,000 or maybe $600,000 house. And when they do the math on it, it's a significant difference in the payment. But what's also happened during that period of time, the house that they've been in for 3 or 4 years, that might have been a $300,000 or $400,000 house when they got into it, is now a $550,000 or a $600,000. So for them to get a marked improvement on the house itself, they really have to go up even higher to really get a difference from what they're already in. So now you get someone going from the $300,000 range to maybe the $700,000 range, and you have a 3, maybe 4-point differential in interest rates. That could be $1,000 more a month for a home that's really only slightly nicer or different than what they're already in. So it's hard to justify moving ahead when you're not really feeling like you're getting value for your money.
Okay. All right, Steve, you heard Chris. Your thoughts? Are we in a stalemate?
Chris is wrong. No, I'm actually kidding. He's not wrong. We are in a stalemate. So it's interesting, right? Because what we're seeing is, and Chris alluded to here in the triangle, we're a little more resilient than a good part of the country because we're growing so fast. People moving here all the time. They don't have a choice. If you live in New York and your job's moving you to Raleigh, regardless of interest rates, you've got to sell the house in New York and you got to buy a house in Raleigh.
Mm.
So we've got a good number of transplants coming here. That certainly helps our market. And we've got a lot of young professionals coming here because of the growth we have in the tech field that attracts, young college graduates into the job force and into the buying market. And they don't have a house to sell, so they're not locked. But what Chris said about everybody else, they are absolutely feeling locked into their house because I crunched some numbers to get a good feel for it. And like you said, you to move up, so move up buyers are a real key to the whole market, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were during the housing crisis. That's part of what hurt the housing crisis because all of a sudden you're underwater on your house. You're not moving up because to close, you're actually going to have to pull money out to close. And then where's your down payment coming from? So unless you were already pretty well off with a lot of money cash wise, you really couldn't move up. Versus once you have a ton of appreciation, not maybe a ton, but once you have equity in the house, that's where most people's down payment comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So during the housing crisis, we became locked in our houses for that reason. And we're locked in it now because if you're selling a house, like Chris mentioned, so let's say you bought a house 3 years ago for $400,000. It's probably in this area worth about $550 right now. So if you want to upgrade, you're not buying a $550,000 house,
right?
Unless you just spot one that you just really like better than yours, but it's roughly the same size, location, all those things. You're moving up, right? And you're probably moving up at least 100,000, maybe 200,000, maybe more. You all of a sudden make that jump from your house is worth $550 and you want a $750,000 house. You've got a lot of equity, so you can put that down to help bring that mortgage payment down. But it's still considerable. When I looked at the numbers of what it would be, like Christopher said, it's going to be a big leap in your mortgage payment. When you would have a leap anyway, right? Because you're moving up in price range, so you're financing more money. But if it was still, let's say the house you're selling is at 3.5%, if what you're buying was at 3.5%, then that jump is not as big a deal as when all of a sudden you're talking going from 3.5% to 6.5%, right? So that is having a huge impact on move up buyers. And absolutely, it's put us in a stalemate.
Okay, well, so I'm gonna start with you with this question. Is there a difference in price ranges that you're aware of? Like you're out there and you're showing houses and you're listing houses. Do you see a difference in the stalemate as you move up in price? Like there's less of a stalemate, once you exceed a certain number versus, I can certainly understand it in the lower ranges, but does it, when we start to move into more luxury, do we start to see that stalemate kind of ease a little bit?
That's a good question. If you're talking about at least here currently, our market's so red hot again that all price points. I just listed a house this weekend for $900,000. I had 30 showings, 9 offers. 5 of those 9 offers way above my list price. What it sold for was way above my list price because we do have a shortage. So the amount of demand that's out there is maybe not what it was when interest rates were lower,
right,
but the supply is even lower. So therefore you still have a seller's market. The luxury market can be a little different too, because if you're a luxury, here in the Triangle, we consider luxury about $1 million plus. If you're the person, if you earn enough to buy $1 million home and you're probably selling a home, moving into it, you've got a certain amount of wealth. The change from 4,000 a month mortgage payment to 6,000 a month mortgage payment doesn't hurt somebody that makes $1 million a year or $500,000 a year or whatever they're making. That change is much bigger on someone who's earning $100,000 a year or less than $100,000 a year, right? So in some ways, the luxury market is a little insulated there. We still saw an impact of it over the last year. But I do think they're not quite affected by a change in their monthly payment. You know, $24,000 extra a year to on your mortgage. I mean, nobody likes to just throw $24,000 out there, but if you're making $500,000 a year,
right,
it's a lot easier to swallow.
So for you, Chris, you know, this article said that there was an increase in mortgage applications, 10% from February to March. What did you see in April? And did you notice a difference in terms of the number of applications in terms of the luxury market versus lower markets?
Yes. So what we have that's real important, and one of the things that's slightly different, myself speaking about this and other people that are talking on maybe a more national level. The majority of the financing I do is on the, in the Southeast, most of which in North Carolina in this area, but generally the Southeast. In our area, last year, when the rates were still low, prior to September, there was such a shortage of supply that it was ridiculous bidding wars. So we just went through maybe, if you go back up to maybe September, October, go back 18 months prior to that, maybe even 24 months prior to that, you had a huge contingency of people with the desire to get into a home that were not able to win one, even though they were qualified. Unless you had considerable amount of cash to throw at an offer above and beyond asking, or maybe throw a lot of money at due diligence to get them to choose your offer, it was really difficult to win a bid on a home. What you also had on a national level, there are home investors all over the country. And I'm sure most of you understand what a REIT or a real estate investment trust is. It's basically a hedge fund that focuses on real estate. Well, there's all this money out there to invest in real estate. So if you're running a hedge fund and your area of the country that you're playing in is not maybe thought to do the best over the next 3 or 4 years, do you keep doing that? Or do you move those purchases, buying investment properties and portfolios to an area that's likely to do better? So our area here has had roughly for the last 2.5 years, every investor around the country picking at the bone to find any real estate that's available. So we have that going on in our area. In addition to that, there's also a huge shortage of homes that not a lot of people are aware of due to the millennials and the Gen Xers and the baby boomers. So the baby boomers are all trying to move down to a slightly smaller house.
Right.
But the houses they're coming out of aren't necessarily the houses that the newer generation of buyers, Gen Z,
Gen Y.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're looking for smaller, lower maintenance,
Got it.
different types of properties. Most importantly, with high-speed internet. Like, I know that sounds silly to anybody who's been in real estate for a period of time, but that's often, ask Steve, one of the first questions asked, do they have fiber in this area? Does this subdivision?
Oh, right. Fiber is the big deal, right?
Well, also, so one of the big reasons for that is the amount of people in an area like the Triangle that are working remotely. So they absolutely want high speed.
So there's thought to be numbers I've seen from different periodicals and stuff are saying that we are literally millions of homes short on a national level right now, this moment, just for the millennials that are finally getting ready to buy. So the houses that a lot of the baby boomers are coming out of aren't necessarily what they're looking for. This new generation of buyers isn't the same as their parents or
Right,
even their parents.
right.
Remember skilled tradesmen. Remember,
Right.
in the olden days when your uncle knew how to do electric, you had a
Right,
cousin that
right,
could do plumbing,
right.
your buddy, he could help you do a roof. Buying buying a fixer upper and putting actual sweat equity in that almost doesn't happen in our area in the triangle naturally. It looks like it happens, but it's almost not a deal. Any house that is even for sale, regardless of the condition, goes immediately. And if it needed work, it generally doesn't even go for a discount on the cost of the work that needs to be done. It's just really odd that you just got to get the property and then, you kind of upfit it. So people buying a house to fix it up themselves, that almost doesn't exist anymore. Like a lot of that is just really different. So where I'm going with all this, you have on a national level buyers that are coming to this area for real estate investment purposes. You also have the growth of the area. You also have the underlying surge of millennials that basically went 10, 15 years without considering wanting a home. And now all of a sudden they want homes. So I believe some of the numbers I saw, baby boomers went from the number one house buyers within like a month period of time to the millennials, like almost surpassing them and doubling them, like just like crazy numbers that, you wouldn't expect. So in our area, which I would say is a small snapshot on national level, we truly have a shortage of homes to begin with. And then now we're just backing into the basic supply and demand. So right off the bat, homes, regardless of rates, regardless whatever, there's a shortage. They're going to start to go at a premium. So I think in our area, we absolutely have a stalemate going on. We really have a fight over any real estate at any price. So not to drag this out too long, but all of those people I mentioned earlier that weren't fortunate enough to win a house last year because they didn't have the extra money to throw at it, they're the ones that are moving ahead right now at the higher interest rates, because while they were waiting for potentially rates to go down or things to get easier on them, what they realized is the rates went from 3 to maybe 7, but that house they were expecting to come down in price now still went up,
Right.
like $20,000 or $30,000.
Right.
So they're all realizing now, wait a minute, waiting for the rates to come down isn't necessarily appropriate, because the difference in payment between maybe a 7 and a 4% interest rate might be $300 a month. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to me and most people I know. That's $3,600 a year, right? That's a reason not to move ahead now, until you realize that same house just went up $30,000 since September of last year.
Right.
So why would you step over $15,000, $20,000 to save $3,600, which is, just a temporary rate thing. So when rates do move around, you have the option of change. And now I can't guarantee they'll ever go down. I can't guarantee what they'll go down to. But if you follow finance and pay attention to some of the things going on, maybe with commercial real estate and the current economy, and then listening to the feedback after all these Fed meetings, we went from everybody thinking you couldn't slow the economy down to some blips now that it's hard to slow down, mainly from the Fed and Powell. And then everybody else in finance and saying, whoa, wait a second, this train is going to be stopped in its tracks soon.
Right.
How do we get that moving again? So I think it's unrealistic that we can go another couple of years at these higher rates without having a catastrophic economic situation that needs to be remedied.
When you hear that, right, and you start thinking about what he's saying, because there's a lot of possible negative implications from your perspective. I mean, and nobody's going to hold you to this, because everybody knows you're not exactly in charge of all this. But is there an answer that you try to give to somebody who comes into the area and says, "But Steve, I got to have a house"? So what do you do to help mitigate that situation, even though, because I mean, like you said at the very beginning, you said, you got people coming from the north, right? Excuse me. And so now they got to have a place to live because they're coming here to work.
Right.
So how do you help them mitigate that circumstance? What's the answer?
Well, so I mean, if you're moving here and you want to buy a house, currently, like over the last month here in the Triangle, and I'm guessing this is happening nationwide too. I'm not just guessing. I've read that it is. Some areas are different, right? But our market over the last month has been just red hot. It is. Prices are going back up. We're seeing lots of multiple offers. Um, we are a due diligence state, which complicates things versus so many other states because you got to put down a non-refundable deposit. Unlike earnest money,
Mhm.
the due diligence fee is not refundable. And to win, the higher you go in due diligence fee also really helps your chances of winning. So if somebody were moving here, and I've got a family moving here actually in the next couple months where I'm going to help 3 different family members all buy a house. And I, with everybody, have a discussion about due diligence fees and the competing market. And I tell people if you're interested in a house that we can tell has been on the market for 3 weeks, it's far less competitive. We can get in there for a reasonable due diligence fee, probably get in there under full price, or if they just adjusted the price, excuse me, and my market analysis says this is fair value, let's go in at full price and lock it down before there is a bidding war. If it just hit the market, though, I tell people like you're going to have to be prepared to go above
Mm.
the list price, more than likely. Again, I do a market analysis and see, all right, at least based on recent sales, this price makes sense.
Mm.
And then it's like, well, how much above this do we need to go to win the offer? So that all gets factored into the equation. And then again, like for us, it then becomes what are you going to do with that due diligence fee as
Mm.
well? So I just prepare people for what they're getting into. We weren't near like we had a lull for several months,
Right.
and it was a lot easier to get into a house. That's gone. I don't know. Will it only last through the spring and summer, or is this going to be? It does feel like people have readjusted to what the interest rates are, and there's just not enough supply. And like Chris talked about, um, there's a lot of reasons for that lack of supply, and it's not getting better. So my thoughts are, you are going to see. I don't expect any kind of the appreciation to be like it was for the 2 years after the pandemic. That was just nuts. But we're going to see steady appreciation for a long time. The studies I've seen, Christopher had mentioned a number over 1 million. There's studies anywhere we're short anywhere from 1.5 million to 6 million homes. Big part of that, the millennials. Millennials aged right now, I want to say from it was like 20, there was a gap of like from age 27 to 38 or something like that. There are 10% more millennials at that age gap than when Gen Xers were at that
Mhm.
age. They're a 10% larger portion of the population. So that's now, if you look at the housing market, when I was 27 to 38, which was not that long ago,
Yeah,
but we'll call it 15 years ago.
couple of years ago.
So 15 years ago, we needed 10% fewer houses
Right.
to satisfy all these Gen Xers that all of a sudden had money
Right.
and were buying houses.
Right.
And I also saw the study showed similar income for that age group back then as now. So you've got the shortage because of that. You've got the shortage because the housing crisis greatly slowed down construction. And then the pandemic, it happened again. The construction, like the amount of construction actually went up, but there would have been more of it. We had supply slowdowns.
Mhm.
So, and then interest rates spiked so fast, builders slowed down again, and we had another slowdown. So, we're not, the number I saw was they would have to, for single family homes, they would have to triple production over the next 3 to 4 years to close that gap. I don't see it tripling. That
Okay.
would be amazing. So you're going to have shortage for a long time, and you're going to have a steady market.
So, guys, I'm going to ask you here. We got just a couple minutes left because this has gone really fast. Can we give folks any hope? Do you do you have any hope for people?
I've got a lot of hope, and I've got a lot of important advice in the right direction. People get so sucked into the minutia, the details of the interest rate, this, that, everything else. And it's important to remember why people own a home. If you're not getting appreciation, if you're not getting a tax benefit, and if a portion of your payment is not going towards the principal, it's actually better to rent than buy. When you're renting something, you're a phone call and 2 days away from any catastrophe being fixed. Hole in the roof, call the landlord. AC's out, call the landlord. Anything's wrong, call the landlord and it gets fixed. When you own a home, you're a phone call, a check, and 2 days away from any catastrophe being fixed. So ownership only makes sense if you're getting the benefits. When I ask people why they want to buy a house, I hear all these things. Oh, I always wanted to, or I want something that's mine, all these things. But most people don't know the reason you're buying a house. The only reason humans buy a house in the United States is appreciation of the asset, tax deductibility, and a portion of your payment is going towards principal, which is essentially the same as a forced savings account.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not getting those, owning shouldn't be quite as high on the list. Now, the area we're in, most of the country, and clearly the area we're in, is set for long-term growth. And owning your house comes down to this. Like, what are we all talking about here? In a nutshell, if you buy a house now and lock in a 30-year interest rate, you have just fixed your housing cost for the rest of your life. Talking about big things, real things. Everybody talks about their finances and putting money away for later in the day. Buying a home allows you to fix your housing cost for the rest of your life. Look at rents. Look at rents in our area in the last 2 years. Look at rents anywhere in the country. Look at historical rents. Look at historical home values anywhere in the country.
Right.
And when you realize, wait a minute, if I don't own a home, my housing cost is going to keep increasing every year, likely for the rest of my life. Now, how important is it to get a house? Now, how important it is a 6 between a 5 interest rate? Now, how important is it if you paid $450 or $460 for the house? That's all minutia. It doesn't matter. If you're not in the house, you're not getting the main benefit that most Americans that own a home are able to get. So it's not nearly as good as it was last spring. We don't have high 2 interest rates and easiness going on, but that's not any reason to give up what the dream really stands for.
That's good. You thoughts, Steve?
I don't think it's a bad time to be buying or selling real estate. I think that it's more complicated for several factors, but like Christopher's talking about, so one of the side effects of a shortage in housing is rent rates increasing, because that, for one thing, that's creating more renters because they can't find a house. Like he was talking about, the amount of first-time home buyers that just got frustrated, couldn't buy a house. What they do? They renewed their leases or they signed a new lease. So there's a squeeze that creates higher rent rates. So if you're a first-time home buyer right now and you're waiting for the interest rates to drop, you're going to see increases. You sign a lease now, and a year from now, if the house that you wanted to buy just rose 7%, you didn't save any money, because the difference in what your mortgage payment worked out to was still lower than excuse me, what that house is going to be a year from now. Not to mention, if you decide, well, I'm going to put it off another year, they're going to raise your rent for a year or two. So now you're paying even more rent. So if you'd have bought that house back in the beginning, then you were better off. So, and let's face it, the current interest rates, when I bought my first house, when anybody on this panel bought our first house, it was fantastic. My first house, I think the mortgage was 7.5%. And everybody was like, you got to buy a house. mortgages are 7.5%.
Right.
I was like, you're right. I'm 30 years old. It's time I bought a house. 7.5% sounds wonderful.
Right.
And then I moved here and I bought it like 6.5%. So where we are right now, it's only in comparison to this crazy period of time, which was all because of quantitative easing, that we had such low interest
Mhm.
rates. And then the other point to that is for the move up buyers, if you are moving up in price, some of the things that we've sort of gotten at here, and I had done the research and I had some numbers. So if you think real quickly, you're selling you have a house right now worth 550. You want to buy a house worth 750. Wait 2 years, and let's just say the house is up. The numbers I put together was wait 3 years. House is up 15%. So now the house you're going to sell goes from 550 to it's like six something. I have it all written down, but I'm not going to pull my notes because we're in a hurry. The $750,000 house now is it's going to put it like at eight
something.
almost to 900.
Almost 900.
So because you're moving up in price, you actually lost like $30,000 in that equation, right?
Mhm.
Versus selling and buying right now. But if the interest rate drops from 6.5% to 5% on that same mortgage amount you'd be financing, you're saving $500 a month. So while you're waiting to save $500 a month, which is $6,000 a year, 3 years from now, you've saved $18,000 to buy a house that's where you actually lost $30,000 in the equation. So you still lost $12,000. So why are you doing it? Go ahead and buy a house.
It's beautiful. You guys, you know what? You guys are great. We're over time, but that's okay. I don't care. First of all, thanks, guys,
Sure.
for being here and doing this. This was a lot of fun for me to kind of watch you guys go back and forth from your different perspectives. I thought it was a lot of fun. Chris, tell people how to get a hold of you.
So easy to get a hold of me. I'm Christopher Coy. My email address is ccoy@townebank.com. TOWNEBANK.com. My phone number is 919-306-8895.
And Steve?
You can reach me at Steve, STEVE, at Linda Craft, CRAFT.com. Phone number is 919-740-9795.
Awesome. You guys are great. Thanks a lot for doing this. Folks, hey, listen, I know you're watching us all over the world. We're available to 250 million homes now on Saturdays, all over the world on DBTV. So for all of you who are watching us on Saturday mornings, thanks for watching us. We really do appreciate it. We know you had a lot of choices. You chose us. You folks who listen to us on the podcast, you know what? Thank you. As you download the podcast, why not give us a positive review wherever you listen to that, whether that's Spotify, iTunes, or wherever that may be. And as I say to you everywhere else, you know what? Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on Real Estate Right Now. Ciao, everybody.